Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McClernand, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome back to another episode of Between the Before and After. So today's episode is kind of special because I believe I have the youngest guest I've ever had on my podcast before. And this is her first podcast. So welcome, Olivia. It's awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So let's just give people a quick snapshot of where you are today and what it is you're doing. And then we're going to dive into your story, though. So why don't you just let people know what you're doing right now?
My name is Olivia Hoffman. I own Brainwaves, and I specialize in neurofeedback. So basically, it's a fancy little cap to put you on your head and helps with stuff like anxiety, depression, brain disorders, all that kind of fun stuff. And I got into it because of my own kind of personal health experiences that have made me go, I don't want anyone else to go through what I had to go through.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you put one of those like fancy, it looks like a swim cap, except it has all these electrodes in. And, do people ever worry that like when you put that on their head that you could like control their brain and like do like funky things to them? Do you get questions like that?
I totally have. In fact, I had a testimonial of someone who got better through it, and he said in the testimonial that he was like, oh, this mind control thing, and I'm like, no.
Like, yes, this is a part of my evil plan to take over the world. Yeah. So he was thinking that like this was, so actually what you're doing though is helping people. And, because when we hear like brainwaves and neurofeedback, and for the average person, this sounds like big words and we forget about it because maybe this is something you're interested in. But really, you're kind of helping people's brain work better.
Yeah, I deal a lot with like connectivity. So like how well is your brain talking to itself? What signals is it producing that is maybe causing, some imbalances where it shouldn't be?
Yeah, that's super cool. I actually like the way of thinking about that, like how well our brain talks to itself. How many people even think about the fact that your brain can talk to itself? That is
probably not many.
Right. And you know what I think about us as human beings, what's really interesting is we have this unique ability of being self-aware. But it's like our brain is maybe self-aware as well if it communicates to itself.
Yeah.
So our brain's pretty marvelous because it runs 24 hours a day. And most of the time it runs in the background completely. We're completely unaware of it. I would say like probably 98% of our brain function is falling into the subconscious level, and only a small amount of it gets filtered into our conscious. So when everything's working well with our brain, that is absolutely fantastic. And our brain is this marvelous, there's more neurons in our brain than there are, or as many at least, as there are stars in the Milky Way. Like that's how incredible our brain actually is. But for you've had an experience with your brain where your brain was not only not working well, it was actually working very, very poorly, and it was crippling you. And this started at a relatively early age in life. And so you were diagnosed with this rare brain disorder. And maybe if you could just share a little bit about kind of what life was like leading up to it, and then kind of how things changed for you when this started happening.
Yeah, so I was really, really ambitious, like even from a young age. I was an avid reader. I went to dance classes from like the age of 5 onward. I would try to get all my chores done before like noon. I'd get up at 6 a.m. Like I was such a go-getter.
Yeah.
And so when I got the symptoms of this, we didn't really know what was going on. My mom had been sick from the time I could remember. So I was used to like that kind of chronic illness thing being around in the household. But when it hit for me, I suddenly had really hard time reading. I suddenly couldn't do dance classes anymore. And the teachers would be like, hey, stop being so lazy. Like, you know how to do this. Just try harder. And it would feel like I was bumping against like an invisible brick wall. That's how I've described it. It's just why can't I do the thing? I know how to do the thing. Let me
Yeah.
through. And
Yeah.
it was scary.
Well, no, yeah, that's gonna be like really, really disconcerting when it's something that you do naturally, and all of a sudden and you can't really explain it. And on top of that, there's this other layer where people who don't understand, because this is not exactly a common thing. This is actually quite rare. And so, like, I think about, from my perspective and the work that I do, think about someone saying to you, "Stop being so lazy," and how did that feel for you?
It was hard because it was so frustrating, because in my head I'm like screaming. I'm like, I know how to do this. I am trying so hard. I love doing this. Why can't I do it? Like,
Yeah.
it's so easy. Why can't I do it?
Yeah. So all of a sudden it was like there was this deficit in your brain. And at the time that this started happening, you weren't exactly sure, if I understand right, you weren't exactly sure what this was. Is that right?
Yeah, it was similar to what my mom had, because she had that kind of like chronic fatigue. She couldn't get up and do anything. It was just really hard for her to do basically anything. And so we were kind of like, oh, this seems similar to what she was experiencing. Oh no. But we had no idea what was going on with her either. They had been trying for like 15 years to figure out why she was suddenly as well completely disabled.
Right. If I could ask, so when did this happen for your mom?
When I was 1, so
Okay.
20 years back.
Yeah, because you're 21 currently?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a record for this podcast, the youngest guest I've had on this podcast yet, 21. So when you're 1, and of course you wouldn't have really any awareness of this, but your mom gets sort of struck with this mysterious illness as well, where something is going on and we don't know what that is. Um, and I know your dad, who's I'm well acquainted with. I've had him on a previous show of mine before, and you'll have to convince him to come on this show as well. I know he's very busy, but and so shout out to him as well, because he really helped me with something that was going on in my brain. But this is probably where you started to develop a passion for understanding the brain. You pair that with this is now happening to you, and so the things that you're trying to do, you can't really do anymore, and you feel tired all the time. And so, did it feel like because this started happening when you're like 15, 16 years
Yeah.
old, like coming into the prime of your life, the ambitious, you go getter, all these things you want to do. And then all of a sudden, plump, like it all comes to a screeching halt. And what was kind of a day like for you when that was going on?
In the beginning, I was still trying to do everything. I was still trying to do school.
Mm.
I was still trying to do my dance classes, and everything was just like going through muck, basically. It was just, everything seemed harder and slower, and my brain wasn't like clicking when I was trying to get it to do stuff. Everything was just kind of like, oh.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then, so that it kind of started like that. Did it progress and turn into something worse as time went on?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely got worse. I think over the course of a year is when it really like peaked. And it got to the point where like I was having tics and like tremors. So if I was trying to like, sit in church or whatever, I'd be sitting there going like this, trying to concentrate, and I couldn't stop shaking. And more
Right.
dramatically, at home, I'd be like violently kind of like whole body shaking. It would
Wow.
be really scary. I couldn't hardly talk. Basically, all I would be able to think was like, this hurts. I hate this. Why am I doing this? Like, I don't want to do this. And that would just have to like hold me for like 15 minutes until I stopped
Wow.
shaking.
And so, was there anything that would like trigger this to come on that you could find out, or would this come on somewhat randomly?
Honestly, my memory's kind of foggy.
Well,
So,
fair enough. Yeah.
like, and that was a symptom as well, is that my memory was patchy and my thinking was like super cloudy. But like just exertion, like physical exertion, mental exertion. The more you tax the brain, the more it would just.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I'm like thinking like what it must be like for your parents as well to see you experiencing this. Like it must be scary for them.
Oh
And they're
yeah, for
like,
sure.
like what is going on here? And so that prompted your dad to do even more digging into kind of neurology and trying to understand that. Just for those who are listening and those who might not be in Alberta or Canada, her dad is a chiropractor with I want to call him a chiropractic neurologist, but I don't know if I'm allowed to call him that. But
I think you are now.
maybe I'm now
He's
because he has
Ghostbusters.
Right. But he's absolutely brilliant. And so, but at this time, he's trying to figure out what's going on, and you're feeling like this is out of control. Like I, and you just have to do less and less and less in order to be able to just get through the day. Um, did you find yourself falling into kind of a depression, a hopelessness?
Oh, for sure. Like, it was hard to gather up specific thoughts of like, man, this is never going to get better, because everything was just cloudy. Everything was irritable. It was like having fire ants in your brain. Everything was just So
Yeah.
like, on the one hand, it was definitely like sad because I couldn't do the things I wanted to do, and I felt like I was letting people down. And on the other hand, I was just irritable and just
Frustrated at
all the
life.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. And that's like quite a visual, like fire ants in your brain. Like, oh my gosh, that just hearing that makes me like, oh boy, that. And this went on. How long was this going on for you?
I think about 3 or 4 years. We got treatment after like about the half month to a year mark, but the symptoms didn't really fully abate for, I'd say, 2-3 years ish.
Right. And so, because in this, I think you described like there's a part of your brain that is like screaming to get out, in a sense, or there's like a part of your brain that goes, this isn't right, this isn't how this is supposed to be, this isn't how things work.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when I think about it, because I often wonder, like, those who maybe have suffered a brain injury or maybe have lost the ability for speech or things like that, if there's something like that also going on inside their brain. I know maybe that's a bigger question than out of the scope of practice that for what you do right now, but I really wonder if that's something where they feel like where somebody like screaming get out, but they can't.
Yeah, I've actually had clients come to me and say that how the difference between before they were sick and sick being now is like, why can't I do the thing? Like, I don't understand why I have to be so tired all the time. I don't understand why I have to just be so all the time when I used to be able to do so much. I feel like I should just be able to do it, but it's just not there anymore.
Yeah. And so, if I understand right, your dad went and acquired a piece of equipment that I'm not sure if I was like, sounds shady. It's like you went and got this piece of equipment that like couldn't necessarily be used like clinically in a professional practice, but he was able to purchase it for personal use. Is that right?
Yeah. So at the time, we were going to the States a lot for neurology conferences. And at those neurology conferences, they would have these massive booths where they would have like the newest technology in neurology. Here's the thing you can do to track eye movements. Here's the thing you can do to, help with low laser therapy or whatever. And this was one of those things. And at the time, that company wasn't licensed in Canada. So we had it in our basement and we used it for our family.
Right. Yeah. So you started doing this kind of neurofeedback treatment. So you kind of put the skull cap with all these. Oops, hit my microphone there. Get the skull cap with. I start waving my hands because I get excited. So you put the skull cap on. You put these electrodes on. And I guess maybe because you'd been. There we go. For those who are watching, we can see it. Yeah. Wow. It looks actually a little bit like a hockey helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And first time you put this on, like, did you have any expectation, or what was it like?
We didn't really have much for expectation. Like, it was supposed to be this kind of new revolutionary thing that you could do to train brain frequencies. And that wasn't really a thing that was talked about, even in like the neurology sphere, because in neurology, you're talking about, hey, what is the function, what are the neurons doing in the frontal lobe? Hey, how are the neurons connecting to other stuff? What are the neurochemicals doing? You're not necessarily thinking about the electrical output that the brain's producing. But when we did it, we found fairly quickly that like stuff was getting better. For me personally, it was hard to see the difference because it was really a gradual change. But from my parents' perspective, they were like, wow, your mood is better. Like, you seem to be a little more energetic. You seem to be a little more, able to handle the world.
Right. So that started to give you a little bit of hope. Because I guess the other thing I'm wondering, what was it like for friends and social life as all of this is going on?
Dead. I had my friends that I talked to online who were in the States.
Yeah.
And, I had my one online class that I did because I was always homeschooled, but that had to drop off when I got sick. I couldn't do any of it. So I had school with the teacher that I interacted with and the students I interacted with. And then I had my friends in the States, and that was about it.
Right. Yeah. And you wouldn't yeah, because I guess if those who you might have done dance with and whatnot, like that just wasn't a thing either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get like your first couple of treatments here, and there's like a little spark of hope.
Yeah.
You know, did when you started these treatments, did you think that this was going to lead to something more? Or were you like, maybe this is just going to provide me with some relief?
We were thinking initially that it would just kind of provide us some relief, like even if we could just get that like 2% quality more of life, like
Mm-mm.
just something, anything. That was our goal with basically any treatment we tried, was just like what can give us just that little extra push to have a little less pain, a little less tired, a little more functioning in life.
Yeah.
And Dad was also thinking, he was always thinking of ways to expand his practice. So he was like,
Right.
hey, maybe this would be a cool thing for me or you to do at some point.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, like what other treatment modalities did you try to sort of get some relief from this? And actually, maybe before we go to that, the other thing I'm kind of curious about is maybe how medical providers in Canada who might not have been even aware of this. We haven't even touched on the name of your condition, by the way. We should probably give people like the big words. But the acronym for it is PANS. Is that correct?
Yes.
PANS.
Yes.
And what does that stand for?
Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric syndrome. There is also a longer form of that called PANDAS, which is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric syndrome associated with strep.
Okay. Like pandas.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, like the bears. Okay. And so, because thinking about like, I think we might have missed over or glossed over like how you might have acquired this as well. So, is it thought that this was a result of like a viral? I hear the word strep in there. Is that a bacterial infection or a viral infection that might have triggered this?
Yeah, generally the idea is if you have a virus that makes it through the barrier that's intended to protect your brain from like colds and flus and stuff like that, if a virus of any kind gets up into the brain, it'll trigger your immune system to not only attack the virus that's there, it'll also start attacking your brain.
Right.
And
Okay.
it'll also be very rapid onset. Usually people will say my kid was night and day. One day they were fine, the next day they're bananas and they're having to get strapped to a hospital bed, right? Like,
Right. Oh man, that's freaky. And
yeah.
so, when the immune system, because autoimmune is the immune system attacking yourself or your own
Yes.
body. So when the immune system attacks the brain, is it quite literally like killing off brain cells, or what's happening there?
Yeah, it's destroying tissue because
Mm,
it's
okay.
trying to get rid of the problem, and the problem it's diagnosed is your brain.
Right. Okay. So, I think in one sense, it's almost maybe a blessing in disguise has happened to you at a relatively young age because your brain is still youthful and healthy and can kind of regrow some tissue and whatnot. Because of course my brain starts going to some potential other applications of this as well. Thinking down the road. But does this mean that, like for you, that is there certain deficits that you continue to live with, or?
For sure. I still have a lot of like chronic fatigue.
Mhm.
So I haven't read like recreationally in like 5 years
Okay.
because it's just exhausting. And I'm
Okay.
still tired. I only work really part-time hours
Mhm,
because,
mhm.
standing at a cashier or, walking for hours at a time is just not something that's feasible for me.
Right. Yeah. But we look at so kind of at the lowest of your low. What was a day like for you?
I would be on the couch after waking up. I don't remember what time I'd be waking up, but I'd end up on the couch in the living room with noise canceling headphones and a dark room with my mom sitting, in a chair in the corner just to kind of keep me company. And at the worst, I couldn't have the TV on. I couldn't have music on. I couldn't have any lights on. I was just in the dark, suffering, just in pain.
Oh
And
man, yeah, that's like that is intense. Literally just in the dark, suffering in pain, can't hear sound, light affects you, like woof. That that again, that seems really intense. But you know, and in those moments, again, I know your brain kind of had in a sense limited capacity, but what goes through your head in those moments when you're in the dark wearing noise canceling headphones, like trying to block out light and things like that? What sort of runs through your head? How do you get through that time? I think is what I'm looking for.
um I think just the reassurance I had people with me that,
Okay.
even though I was suffering, even though things seemed kind of bleak, is that, there would be a way.
Mhm.
Eventually there would be a way that I could, go into the world. There would be a way that, I could have some like feeling back. And, you know, with how hard dad tried and with all of his like training in neurofeedback, or not neurofeedback, neurology in general, like he was trying, like he was doing everything that he could. And that, you know, whenever I needed him, that he was there. And, you know, I just had people. I had people there to be like, yeah, we're there with you. We've got you.
Yeah, which is amazing, and shout out to your dad too. Like I quite like him, obviously because I've known him for a number of years. But I just see how genuine he is in terms of like really wanting to help people and how excited. It's almost like how excited he gets when there's a complex case waiting for him.
Right?
He's just like, I can't wait to do this, because he really genuinely loves making difference in people's lives. But I can see that this is really where it comes from, is him wanting to make your life better. And I think to be able to hear that, I know we're telling your story, but to be able to hear that about him also just really humanizes him in a sense, because some people might only know him in the clinical setting, and he's like, because he's extremely smart, right? He's like genius level intelligent or super genius level intelligent, and so for some people it might even be a little bit intimidating, because he's like smart and fast thinking, all that. But to sort of see this other side, this is why he's really doing this, and this is what's leading you to doing what you're doing. And so, but I think that speaks to something really important, is that like when someone's going through their like darkest moments and just really, really struggling, they're just having someone's physical presence there like makes such a difference, having some form of human connection.
Yeah, because I couldn't really socialize. I couldn't go out and interact with people. There was no thinking involved in any of this, and there wasn't a whole lot of immediate help either. Even when we were doing treatments and I had to get needles in my stomach every other week for this treatment,
right? Yeah.
It was good just to have somebody there, just in the room, even if we couldn't do anything else. It was really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess I'm curious, like along the way, trying to find some answers to this. So, you get this virus that attacks your brain, and your brain gets inflamed, and, certain deficits are sort of taking place. What sort of treatments did you try, and did any, what provided you with like some degree of relief?
Well, when we got diagnosed, actually even before that, when we had the kind of peak of symptoms, we said, this is it. We're going to go to Dallas. We're going to go to the big neurology center down there with Dr. Brock, I think it was, his big clinic down in there. And we're gonna try to do that. So when I went there, they went through the battery of neurological tests, very similar to what my dad does here.
Yeah.
Where you do the eye training, you do the balance training, you do all this kind of stuff, you do the testing and the therapy to try to see what's going on. And they said, you know what? Here's a long shot. Let's do this blood test. It's a very rare disorder. We'll see what comes up. We'll see if we have to deal with that, or if that's just something that we at least crossed off the list.
Right.
And it came back positive. So the only treatment for that is IVIG, which is immune globulin. So basically resetting the immune system so that it doesn't have the memory of deciding that your brain is a bad thing.
Okay, yeah, because the immune system is really fascinating in that it can develop memory. I mean, it's important that it can develop memory to fight off infections, but in this case, we want to erase its memory, that so it doesn't think that the brain is a bad thing, because at one point there'd been a virus there. Now, what I guess I'm curious then, thinking about this, I wonder if we refer to this as a rare thing, but I wonder if it's maybe not as rare as we think, but it never really gets diagnosed or looked for clinically, because maybe it can be a difficult thing to pin down. What is your experience with that?
I feel like there's definitely more kids out there that have PANS or even just PANDAS than we originally thought. It was definitely a lot less known at the time. And I think it's very hard to diagnose, because it can mirror so many different disorders. It can mirror Tourette's. It can mirror depression. It can mirror anxiety. It can mirror ADHD. Like, it can mirror so many different things. The thing that would only tip you off that it's anything else is the combination of the symptoms, like just how many happen at a time and how fast it happens. It's intended to be a rapid onset thing, as opposed to, hey, you were born and you were struggling with focus.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a super important thing for people to actually be aware of, is that that this can mirror so many other things, and maybe this is why it can get missed. But so, and it's very likely if it's gonna happen, it would maybe commonly happen after some kind of illness. So like, hey, my kid was sick, or I got sick, and I just didn't feel like I was the same person after this illness. And there must, I'm guessing there's probably a spectrum of symptoms. Like I think your case was probably quite severe. Would that be accurate to say? And maybe there's a spectrum of symptoms where sometimes it's a little more under the radar.
Yeah, I feel like there's different levels. I think overall it's still fairly severe. I actually know somebody personally who also got diagnosed with PANS,
Okay.
and she ended up on the couch for
Mhm.
years while
Mhm.
doctors were trying to figure out what to do with her. And she was even on the kind of the experimental list of like, hey, you have PANS, let's try some new experimental stuff on you, see what
Right,
works.
right,
Right,
yeah, yeah,
like, so she
yeah,
had some benefit with that, but like she was still housebound, and it took
yeah,
5 years for her to leave the front door. It
right,
was hard
yeah,
for her to open the front door, but it took years just to like step outside.
right. So were you on the experimental list as well?
No, he was in the States.
Just down in the US. Okay.
Yeah.
So down in the US, there's a list of an experimental list of like, hey, because you have this rare condition, we're actually really interested in you, and maybe we can try this out on you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because
yeah,
there really isn't treatment for PANS in Canada that I know of. At
right,
least definitely not when I got diagnosed. It wasn't known in Canada. There's no treatment for it in Canada. And it was pretty rare to know, even in the States. There was one clinic, maybe two, in the
right.
entirety that actually specifically dealt with PANS.
Right. And I mean, like the brain is such a complex organ that for all that we know about it, I feel like it's like we probably know like nothing about it relative to what could be known about it. That's like a really convoluted way of saying it. In other words, we probably know like 5% of what there is to know about the brain. And maybe that's being generous. Like it's that sort of unknown still. And so, and I wonder if sometimes it was like frustrating going to see medical providers who didn't have answers, or maybe tried to pin it on something that they knew, just using the best experience they had, but really just going, well, it's probably this. Or, were there times where medical providers kind of just like dismissed you as this is something in your head, or things like that? Did that ever occur?
Not so much with me, but definitely for my mom. And that's why I didn't have
Mm,
to go through it, because they had spent, already
right.
10 to 15 years going to doctor after doctor after doctor. And the doctor was going, oh, you might have depression, or straight up, we don't know what's wrong with you.
Mm.
Maybe just go for walks, trying to be
Right,
less
right.
tired, right? Like,
Yeah.
because they had no idea. So I kind of got to not have to go through that, because they already knew that most medical doctors would have no idea what to do with me.
Right, right. Yeah, because this isn't really something that comes up in maybe common clinical, like sort of medical practice. So, and this isn't to fault doctors, but I mean, and I think as a professional, it must be frustrating when you encounter something you like literally have no idea what this could be, when someone is like really desperately looking for answers. And so ultimately, you had these experimental injections that were sort of retraining your immune system. That brought you some relief. Was it kind of like temporary relief, or did that sort of get you to the next level where it's like, okay, I can function a little bit more?
It definitely brought me to like the next level. The idea with the IVAG is to have it permanently stick. So it takes a year to go into effect, which is insane. Um, but it was intended to like be a one and done. That's what you have to do.
Okay.
And after that, you should be back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did two different kinds of forms. I did
Okay.
through the stomach, 4 needles in the stomach every other
Oof.
week,
Oh boy.
for about 6 months. Very painful.
Yeah.
And it made it worse. And so I had to do a higher dose in through the veins. So
Intravenous.
faster,
Right.
intake system, and more of it.
Yeah.
And then that was what ended up kind of sticking.
So what is the idea behind this theory? Is it to like try and give you new immune cells that have no memory of your brain? And is there like a part of it where it's like killing off other parts of your immune system and then replacing it? Or like,
And I'm not entirely sure what the
I don't know, I'm like,
mechanism of it is, but
I'm
like
like asking you a question.
I don't think it's more like it doesn't destroy the immune system. It's
Mm-mm.
more just a matter of like kind of washing away or retraining.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, yeah. Getting 4 needles in your stomach though, man, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. How like, and are they like, is it like a short injection, or are you like laying there with them stuck into your stomach for a period of time, or what's that like?
It was an hour. I would get
Oh,
one
oh,
of the people who actually work here, who was also a nurse, who
yeah.
would put the 4 needles in. We had numbing spray because it would hurt so bad.
Mm,
And then you would sit there for an hour while it pumped it into you, and
yeah.
afterwards I'd have like a little like lump on my stomach from where the fluids would be.
Right,
Um,
right.
and you
Because
had
it's
to
like
wait
making
between
these pockets of fluids that would
yeah,
slowly diffuse into your system.
yeah. and you also had to drink a lot of water with it because otherwise you would get migraines and nausea. So you would know if you didn't drink enough water beforehand.
Right. Oh man. And you said like it made it worse for a period of time?
Yeah, if symptom wise, I don't know if we really noticed anything, but when we did the blood test again, they were like, yeah, no, it got worse.
As in there was more of these like antibodies or immune cells that were being expressed than should be there. It's like, the immune. What I guess is there like a cell count they're looking for? What I know we're getting a little specific, but like, how do they know that it got worse? What cell is it, or cells? I guess
it's a very specific antibody, I believe they're looking for. So it's the amount of antibodies that they found.
Okay. So you discover, this is making it worse. So now we have to change what we're doing. But did I feel like a bit like a setback? Like I just spent 6 months like getting needles stuck into my stomach, laying here for an hour in quite a significant amount of pain, sometimes getting migraines if I didn't drink enough, only to find out that looks like this is making things worse.
It was definitely disappointing. I think the worst part of it was we had to drive to the border to pick it up because it went across the border. So we had to personally come there saying, "No, this isn't illegal. This is safe. We can bring it across the border." And then we'd have to drive 6 hours there and back to do that. And that was the painful part, to be like, really, that was all for nothing.
Oh man, no kidding. Like just thinking about like the things that you go through, like because you have to 6 hours from Red Deer down to like the Montana border, and then sort of have to try to explain to like the border guards, like, hey, this isn't like drugs or something. Well, I mean, it's a type of drug. This isn't illegal narcotics. Like this is actually a medication to help me treat a disorder that I cannot get in Canada. Did it ever get stopped? They were like, no, this can't come across, or?
No, I don't think so. I think we managed to get it across pretty good.
Okay. Well, you feel a little bit like a mule at times going down there. Oh man, like that's quite something. And so so after that you switched to like an intravenous version of the treatment, and did that provide you with like kind of some relief or get things going in the right direction?
Yeah, we had to go to Washington, D.C. for that. And the after effects of that were horrible. Again, you have to drink enough water or it gives you bad side effects. We drank so much water. Both me and my mom, we did it at the same time. And we were like, we drank the water. We drank so much water. And it was awful. We were like in
having
so
to pee all the time.
Pain. Like we were nauseous. Like I was just hanging over the toilet, fever. I was incoherent. It was so bad. It was the worst pain that either of us had felt in our lives, and we're like, nothing tops that. Everything is less bad than this. And that's his mom who went through childbirth.
Right. Wow. Well, I mean, if that's in your future, at least you can say, well, boy, I know I'm tough enough to get through that. Like, my goodness. So that is a part of it that like, and somehow you get through all of this because like this, I have to go through this to like get better. And so how often did you have to go and have these intravenous injections done in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, we found like a clinic. So it was like the clinic where if you have PANS, this is the clinic you go to. And they mostly dealt with children. I think I was the oldest one there to get treatment. And clearly mom was older, much older than their demographic. And it was also super expensive because unless you had US health insurance, it was thousands of dollars to get done.
Man. Yeah.
So that's the only thing.
No Lamborghini to Oh, wow. Okay. And did you have to go like every month or every 2 months or how frequent was it that you had to go down there for this treatment?
Just the once. We just went there once, got the injection for 2 days, had the horrible side effects, and then that was it. We never had to go back. Thank goodness.
Oh man. I was thinking if you had to go like every 2 weeks to have this done and go through this absolute torture, I mean, not as if you hadn't been through enough already. And how old were you at this time?
Around 16.
16. Oh man alive. That's tough. But at least you have a little bit of hope. And somewhere along the way, your dad acquired, or you guys, your family acquired this EEG machine. Where did that come into the picture?
About a year later is when we started doing that. And again, we did both for me and mom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So you had this treatment, the injection, the super painful, torturous like treatment that made you go through excruciating pain. And then you start to see that things are improving. But so you're kind of like, I don't know if halfway is the right way, like based on where you're at right now, but it's like you have a degree of functionality back. What did it allow you to do?
Basically, it just kind of got me out of the dark mostly. Like, I was able to watch TV, I was able to listen to music. I still had to, be on the couch. I still
Mm-mm.
was, having noise canceling headphones on. I was able to do the one class that I was in. I was in one rhetoric class and a creative writing class with the same teacher who was super lenient with me because I couldn't do essays. I couldn't do the reading that was required. But he was always super nice. He's like, I know you're trying. You're being more apologetic than I care.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, there's like metaphorical and literal. You like, I don't have to live in the dark anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the title of your book, this future book that you might write.
I actually did write a poetry book called Delirious, which was around the time that I was
No
my
kidding.
sickest.
Okay. Yeah, that's really like just trying to put into words like what it was you were experiencing.
Yeah, I really wanted it to be a visceral experience of like what I was going through, what insanity would look like, what this kind of like delirium looks like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, did you ever which that's a really interesting thing. Did you ever fear that like you were crazy or that like you were going to go crazy if this continued or anything like that? Did any of those like fears kind of pop up into your head?
Oh, for sure. And it
Okay.
definitely reflected in the writing of like, what if you're like crazy forever? Can you trust yourself? Can you trust your own thoughts? Is anything
Oh
real when you're
man.
having all these dramatic emotional reactions to really simple things like touch? My
Right.
tag on my shirt, the hair brushing on my neck, and it's sending me into this, the spasm, can I really have a normal life? Should I really be interacting with other people? Can I really trust what I'm thinking?
Wow, yeah. That in itself, again, it feels like, almost like horrifying to think about this place where you're like, exactly that. Can I trust anything that my brain tells me? Really, if we think about that's kind of like what's happening. Can I trust any sensation that, because our brain, like we have this idea that we're looking at reality, but in a sense, what it really is our brain is like taking all of this like sort of stimulus, stuff through our eyes and through our ears and through our skin and whatnot, and sort of turning it into a coherent picture in our mind of what's actually happening. And so for you, your reality is, could we use it maybe like almost like it's unstable, uncertain. You don't
Yeah.
really know what you're experiencing. And you're 16, 17 years old, like, which is
Formative
already
years.
right. You're formative years where like your brain is still developing. And again, I think probably one of the things that was really like helpful or stabilizing for you is to have like somebody in your life that was like an anchor, you
Yeah.
know, or some people. And who were those people for you?
Mom spent a lot of time just hanging out with me. I had my friends in the States who
Mm.
gave me that kind of outside, help that I was able to be there for them while they were going through the throes of pans, and they were able to be with me while I was going through, normal teenage years and being, chronically ill.
Yeah, because I mean, there's just a part of you that probably was like, "Darn it, I just want to be a normal teenager."
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
missing out on so much, right?
yeah,
Because I can't do anything.
yeah. And so that then your family acquires this EEG machine, which wasn't licensed for professional use, but it was legal to own. Is that correct?
Yeah. We could use it for personal use, but if you wanted to
Yeah.
make any kind of like profit off of it, you'd
Right.
have to get the licensing account.
Okay. And here I'm thinking you could have this like underground clinic in your basement where it's like, come get your brain tuned up, or have like brain tune up parties or something like that. Like, as that'd be quite something as like a teenager. Hey, come over and get like your brain tuned up. Like, um, so then you put the skull cap. So you get this machine. You put the skull cap on. You kind of get like your first treatment or a series of treatments. And what is a treatment like with that?
It's pretty simple, actually. It's based on kind of like a yes/no training. So when your brain does certain things, it's pretty chaotic in how it works. Everything it has what it's primarily doing, which is, say you're in alpha and you're, calm and relaxed. Your brain is mostly in alpha, but you have all the other frequencies still going beep, 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 beep. It's still pretty random. What the
Okay.
cap does is it measures that and then says, hey, when you produce less delta, you get a reward.
Oh, okay.
So then when you do the right thing, when your brain produces less delta, you get a and when it's not in the zone, then it gets nothing. And
Okay.
yeah,
And maybe we should clarify. So, our brain has frequencies.
yes.
Yeah. And is there like four or five primary frequencies that we talk about here?
5. So there's delta, which is responsible for your like deep sleep, dreamless sleep. Theta, which is your REM sleep or really deep meditation, usually associated with like visualization and stuff like that. Alpha is your calm, relaxed, like baseline. If you're watching the clouds, then you're in alpha. Beta is your focus.
Okay.
And that also splits off into like a high beta, which is a like stressful focus.
Hey.
And then there's gamma, which is your fight or flight.
Interesting. And now I'm like really fascinated because so you get to see like what someone's brain is producing, what levels like of these different frequencies the brain is producing. And could you then, from like looking at it, be like, okay, you're producing, this is sort of what your brain is doing right now. Like you're, really excited right now because your gamma levels are really high or whatever. Can you sort of like read like the brain waves and be like, oh, this is where they're at right now, or?
I can actually get a pretty good idea of what they're experiencing. The report that I get from the testing, not from therapies, but from testing, is like 20 pages long. And so you get a really good idea of like the 3D image of what your brain is in. For example, for like me and mom, all 5 of our frequencies were screaming red, too high. They were all too high. And
right, so like hypersensitive.
Sorry?
Is it like being hypersensitive, like super, super heightened senses?
Basically, yeah. It's associated with like brain inflammation. So like a side effect of having the virus in your brain, having an autoimmune disorder in the brain, is having your brain be inflamed. So that's a lot of what causes, say, like the irritability and the moodiness and, foggy thinking and stuff like that. You'll get like a pressure in your head is what caused the ants in your brain, kind of an idea.
Right.
So what that looks like on the sheet is red, 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 red.
Okay. And I mean, this is super interesting. And I mean, we'll talk offline a bit more. We'll nerd out a little bit because I know, like for my wife, for example, she was thrown off a horse a number of years back, and she's actually seen your dad to get some of these treatments. But and now having gone through like childbirth and not sleeping because a kid wakes up multiple times a night and so on and so forth, there's just things that she experiences. And I know for myself, there have been times in the past where I was like, this doesn't make sense. Where I would just like, let's say, brush her arm with my elbow, like just pass her and going through a doorway or something, and she'd be like, why did you elbow me? And I was like, well, I didn't. I literally just touched you. But the way that so I'm really fascinated actually because we're both my wife and I are going to do this treatment, so I'm really fascinated to see what kind of comes of this, because sort of starting to see these things and recognize them and go, like something is like, one doctor said to her, like, basically you have heightened senses was the best he could sort of come up with, is like you're more sensitive to things. And so I think in your experience, you were like way more sensitive to things. Yeah. And so how many treatments did it take for you to kind of almost feel like, I guess we could say like where you're at right now is your new normal, and it's miles, from where you were before. How many treatments with this machine did it take to sort of start feeling like you're back to like kind of almost back to your old self again?
We did a lot for me specifically. And I know there was a period where, because we were still learning how to do this. It's a very complicated like software. So we were still trying to figure out.
We make it like sound so simple. Like just put this on, it just tunes this and that, and ta-da, like your brain works better,
Yeah, once you know, it's simple. When you don't know, it's like there are so many settings to this. So, it took me, I think, longer than I would say my clients would take, because we were still trying to figure it out. I think we did upwards of like 40, 60 therapies on me, between trying to figure it out and having some setbacks of like, oh, that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Right now, so I guess this makes leads to another question. Is there the possibility of like tuning your brain the wrong way, I guess, if I could put it that way, almost like, oh shoot, we got the setting wrong and we made your brain worse? Is that possible?
Yes and no. You can cause problems, like you can be more irritable, you can be have less sleep, stuff like that. That definitely is a possibility to like happen, and that's what happened to me for a little bit, is that we did too much of one thing and it went too far, and so I was starting to get like really irritable. But the nice thing about that is you notice it fairly quickly. Like if you're keeping track of how you're feeling, you're gonna notice if something feels off, and then you change it, and then that doesn't stick.
Okay.
And even if you were to do like a lot, like I did, there's still a very easy way of backpedaling and going into the direction you actually need to be going.
Right. Whoops, went in the wrong direction. Okay. And you can literally just like run another treatment and kind of balance it back out. Is that what,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because this is such like a new thing and we're talking about like kind of tuning up a brain. That might be a little bit scary for people. Like, like you mentioned one of your clients used the term, I think it was like mind control or something like this mind control thing really works. You're like, yeah, whoa, hang on a sec. You really like, it's probably like, I would say extremely low risk of like side effects. Is that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like it definitely has a lot of like applications. Like I attended a seminar on addiction. You can do this for stroke. You can do this for epilepsy. There's these really sensitive cases that you can still do this on without a risk of, hurting or killing somebody, right?
Yeah. And really, so when we talk about like making it worse, it's largely just going to be like maybe someone doesn't sleep as well or is a little bit more irritable, that kind of thing. Like, they're not going to like, rip off all their clothes and run screaming out of the clinic thinking they're a werewolf or something.
No, definitely not. Yeah, usually you're thinking more stuff like irritability, lack of sleep, stuff like that.
Yeah. Now, so and how frequently would somebody do like one of these treatments?
My like standard is twice a week for 20 minutes. Back when I was training, they were like, yeah, you should do this for an hour. When you're someone who has a chronic condition, chronic fatigue or autoimmune, that's too much. You will burn out. And burning out is not good. So
in other words, like, because it's just too much stimulation for your brain and your brain just feels, so I guess that could be the other side of it, is if it goes for too long, your brain just feels tired.
Yeah.
And you kind of discovered that through the process of trial and error?
Yeah. We definitely found that like you would get tired afterwards. It's like working out. It's like working out for your brain. If you're going to go exercise, some people have a higher tolerance. Some people can work 2 times a day, every single day. They got the gains, they really got this. And they're fine with it. They feel great for doing it. And then there's people who go to the gym once a week and they're like, I feel like I just got ran over by a truck. Just by this little bit that I do. And I think that's a really good comparison for this as well. Is I've had people who do this 40 minutes every single day and they did great. And
give me more, crank it up.
And I have people who do 20 minutes 2 times a week and they're like, oh, that's okay.
Yeah. Like after a treatment, your brain feels tired, but and this might seem like a silly question, but it's like people are safe to drive home. Like they have a treatment. Yeah. It's just, you're just feeling like, oh, I'm just a little bit more tired. Like maybe they would want to go home and have a nap or something like that. Or right. Yeah. It's not like someone's actually impaired.
No. Generally, I would say like you'll get more tired afterwards, and like having juice or something that's like really quick to get the blood sugar back up is a really good way to feel better. Sometimes you might need a nap, but it shouldn't last longer than a day, and it shouldn't last past, rest.
So like maybe bring a banana and some electrolytes. Yeah. After the treatment, have a banana and drink some electrolytes or something.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm totally going to do that when I'm getting my treatments. And now I'm like so curious because, like I said, we're going to set this up where I actually get these treatments, and it'd be really interesting to come back and maybe have another conversation about this where we talk about like what happened for me, because I think my brain functions pretty good despite some sleep deprivation from a kid. But so what about someone, because we've talked about people with like really severe chronic conditions, and so I have just a few sort of curiosity questions more than anything else. And I know there's because like you can't necessarily say we're going to treat this medical condition, correct? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we want to be careful, like kind of what we say. You're not promising to treat anything, but maybe what we could say is within the research, have you observed that people who have, what if someone has like Alzheimer's or dementia where their brain is starting to neurodegeneration? Has this treatment been shown to create some improvement in symptoms for people who might be experiencing that?
Oh, for sure. There has been studies done on Alzheimer's. There's been studies done on dementia. There's been studies done on ADHD, studies on anxiety and depression and stroke and concussion. Like they've been doing more and more studies that have been showing that not only does it work, but it lasts. Like one I saw recently was people who had ADHD. The effects of the treatment lasted for 20 years.
Wow. And so here's a couple of other things then. I guess somebody would maybe do a series of treatments, like maybe 10 treatments. Is that sort of standard, or I don't know if there's a standard number of treatments?
I generally start with 10.
Okay.
At 5, you notice the difference, which is what I really like about it, is that there's a point where you go, yeah, this is going in the right direction. We're doing the right thing. 10 is when that really like sticks. And depending on how complex the patient is, they might need more than that. But definitely, if you can only do 10, then 10 still gives a lot of benefit.
Right. And you mentioned, because I wonder then, I have like a whole bunch more questions, but I'm like, we'll try one question at a time here. So someone gets like, say, 10 treatments. And for most people, would that mean that like this sort of like it lasts, like it sticks, like, hey, you're good for a number of years? Or would people go back for like a tune up every once in a while? Or how does that work?
They will last afterwards. Like at 10, that's when it really like, it clicks like a habit. Like it's locked in. The only time that you would need to come back in is, say, if you have a chronic condition, say something like I have.
Right.
Like me and my mom still need to do this because we have a condition that won't go away.
Right, because yours is an ongoing. So because like you've got relief from this treatment and continue to get relief, so you can function. You're now running a business. Like you're doing something really, really cool. But the reality is, this is something that's likely going to be with you for life. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and also like trauma is also something that you would have to come back for, because that makes a big aspect on the brain. Physical trauma, mental trauma, grief. Those things can definitely have such a big impact on the brain that you might have something new that you might need to come back for. And I had quite the shift between, being disabled and, working here part-time to having my business. And because there was such a jump in like, hey, I'm moving out. Hey, I'm married. Hey, I have a business now. All these more and more
huge life changes. Yeah.
Now I need to go back into this. I took a break for 2 or 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
And now I need to come back into it because I've done a lot to my brain, and now it's going.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, slow down. That's like a good visual of your brain there. Like whoa. Yeah, and so you're married. Well, congratulations, by the way. And how long have you been married? Total sidetrack question.
About 6 months now. We got married in early October.
That's amazing. Congratulations. And your husband is aware of what he's getting in for.
Oh, he knows.
Yeah. And may I ask, like, have you known your husband for like a number of years, or like, did you discover him in the course of like getting treatment, or how did that come about?
Oh, we met like about a year ago. So definitely after all of my treatments were done, after I was able to start working part-time. I wasn't moved out yet at that point. But yeah, we had met like online. We had known some mutual friends. And we both had a passion for writing, so we were like, "Hey, we should talk about writing." Oh wait, we caught feelings.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think why this sort of is a part of the story as well. As we go back to like where you were kind of at your lowest point, like, am I crazy? I'm alone in the dark. Am I ever going to have any kind of life? And here you are now. You're married. You're in a committed relationship, and you're an entrepreneur, like running this business and helping other people. Like, that's how sort of dramatic. And if you could sort of because I guess we might say, like, is there some limitations to sort of this brainwave treatment that you do? I mean, and that's like a really tough question, but I guess
it is a tough question. But I mean, not really. Under my like counselor license, because my license is as a professional counselor, so I can't necessarily treat anything that's going to be life or death. But in terms of something a little more practical, I would say like I can't necessarily help with like physical conditions. If you break your arm, I can't really help with healing.
Right. Okay.
But if you have chronic pain because of how your arm set 7 years ago, okay, I can help with that. Right.
Yeah. Very cool. So I think, there must be like this long list of things that, again, maybe we would say, maybe you're not directly, I am treating this, but it's like when you go through this treatment, if this is a condition that you have, you're likely to experience something better. So for example, people have been through a whole lot of stress and emotional distress over these last few years. And we could even say for some people, and maybe for many people, it's really been almost traumatic. What we've kind of been through going through this pandemic, and the way that like society has kind of been rocked and life as we know it has dramatically shifted. And I know, like in the line of work that I do, like a lot of people have gained weight, for example, over this, and started to use food as a coping mechanism. And once we start down that path of using food as a coping mechanism, it can be really difficult to kind of unwire that. Is this a treatment that could be helpful in that regard? Maybe someone struggles with that.
Oh, for sure. Like anything that is like an ingrained habit, and that can be anything from how your brain processes trauma to an addiction to, and a coping mechanism, something that has kind of been ingrained in the neurons. The more you use the pathway, the stronger it becomes. This is a really good way to kind of give the brain something new to work on. Here's a different way of doing things that the brain didn't come up with already.
Yeah. And then is there a way that this could almost be like biohacking as well? I know that's like a really trendy like term, like we're gonna biohack, but is there a way that, let's say for example, someone could get this treatment and maybe start meditating or visualizing, because and I'm just going to throw this out here. The mind is really amazingly powerful, and I'll just give one example. So there was this study where they took two groups of people, and group one, they had them physically do finger strengthening exercises. Now I'm trying to like picture what they are, like I'm doing finger curls, why do they pick those? I don't know. But anyways, they had them do finger strengthening exercises. Group two, they had just visualize doing these. They literally like laid in a bed and visualized doing these exercises. So group one saw a 30% increase in strength, the ones that physically did the action. Group two, the ones that just laid there and visualized in their head that they were doing this, they saw a 22% increase in strength just by picturing the fact. Now, obviously, it's still more valuable to do a physical action. So I guess where I go with this, I'm kind of curious now. Could somebody use something like this in combination with like maybe, I don't know, meditation or visualization and really like sort of unlock even greater potential in their life?
I feel like you can, because the frequency of meditation is kind of alpha to theta. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have enough alpha or theta in your life, if you don't have enough calm, mindfulness, meditation, visualization is really good for that. If you have a chronic disorder like fibromyalgia or an autoimmune disorder where it's really, really hard for you to walk or do physical activity, visualization is, and which is part of my dad's like thesis paper for his master's, is if you can just visualize, that can help you get better. If you can just do a little extra walking in your day, then that can do a little better. Mindfully thinking about, I'm going to pick up the pen, I'm picking up the pen, I'm twirling it around, and I'm doing it pain-free, and I'm going to put it back down. That really helps with stuff like that.
Because I mean, and actually, I was like, while we're doing the podcast, one of the reasons I'm interested in this is because I've had this crippling hip pain that I can't get answers about. I've been treated by your dad. I had chiropractic treatments, right? I've had osteopath. I've had a physiotherapist. I've done somatic experiencing. I've done massage therapy. So going to all these different treatment providers, being like, what is wrong with, and I've done like multiple modalities underneath those umbrellas too, being like, what is wrong with my hip? Why doesn't it work the way it's supposed to? But what's really interesting is, I want to say 17 and 18 years ago, I had two motorcycle accidents, but almost like a year apart. And both times I landed on my left hip. And so but back then I was just a reckless, young 20s kid, I wasn't responsible, like, married and running a business. I was just a reckless idiot with a motorcycle. And so it's like, this crippling hip pain has come up, and we can't seem to figure it out because, one provider said to me, said like, I can't find anything structurally wrong with your hip. And I was like, well, this is kind of frustrating, because I want my hip to work, and it'll just randomly, I could just be walking up the stairs, a normal motion, all of a sudden, and you go, and I'm like, and so that's actually one of the reasons why I'm interested in this. So I'm putting a lot on your shoulders when I'm like, hey, I want you to make my hip. I'm like, I want you to make my hip work better by tuning up my brain. Is that something within the realm of possibility where you see improvements in something like that?
That is actually realistic, believe it or not. So with pain, and this is also along the lines of what Dad's been writing about, is the more you feel pain, the more likely you are to feel pain. So the pathway that feels pain will get stronger and stronger and stronger the more you feel pain, which means you will feel pain for longer and you'll feel more intense pain. Super fun.
The path of chronic pain.
Right, yeah. So when you do neurofeedback, the idea is to break that link. So there's a few different ways that you can kind of take down pain. You can do it from bottom up. Say if you did like a TENS machine, that
which I've got one in order
going up, but that doesn't necessarily take away the pain. You could do, meditation as a frontal lobe way of taking, like a conscious way of taking down the pain, or you can do something that's a little higher than that, which is, taking it from the pathway out. You're saying, don't be so. Telling the brain, don't be sensitive about this. This isn't you're not dying. There's nothing broken there. You don't need to worry about this anymore.
Right. And that's what the neurofeedback can do.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, I've tried like the Curable app as well, which is like a chronic pain app, and there are some like meditations and visualizations. And I try to think about it differently. Like instead of saying I have a, this is not quite accurate, but it's like instead of saying like I have a pain in my left leg, it's like, oh, I have a slightly less than comfortable sensation in my leg. So you're using the word comfortable in the sentence to describe instead of like I have pain in my leg, for
Right.
example, to see if it doesn't trigger. But again, a lot of these things haven't necessarily provided relief. So I'm really fascinated to. So we're definitely gonna have to do a follow up conversation where we go, I was able to get relief because of this, and no pressure or anything like that. um, and I appreciate you've been really generous with your time, because you also just indulged some just genuine curiosity I have about this treatment. And that's one of the great things about me getting to do these interviews is I get to sort of pick your brain in particular about the brain, which is really fascinating. But I think you have this incredible story. And why I wanted to interview you is because, like, as someone so young who's been through so much, you have this incredible strength of character and resilience. And here you have this really positive, sort of like vibrant outlook on life. And that's quite incredible for all that you've been through. And I really want to commend you for that.
Oh, thank you.
So actually we should show, we've been talking about this. I'm like, why don't we show people where they can find you? Brainwaves EEG. Look at that beautiful website. Brainwaveseeg.com is where they can find you and they can learn more about this treatment. Now, and I guess I'm curious, like this must be like not that common, like in Canada, let alone I'm like thinking in Alberta, but do you know of anyone else even in Canada that's doing this?
I don't know about in Canada at large, but I do know there's about 3 other people in Alberta who do this, but it's still very rare. Like, not very many people know about it.
Yeah, and so you're getting in early on this, on I don't want to say on this trend because it's totally not just a trend. This is like an amazing therapeutic modality. But yeah, rediscover your quality of life. That's just seems like amazing. And here's all the things you could have: some, stress, sleep, focus, memory, pain, brain fog, concussion, something else. All these different things that you can create some improvement around, which is really, really amazing. If people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what it is, what's the best way to reach out with you and connect with you?
Either calling the number that's on the website, which leads directly to the clinic, or if you want to talk a little more directly to me, then the brainwaveseeg@gmail is a really good way to kind of directly ask a question.
Awesome. Fantastic. So let's switch back to this view here. There we go. That's been amazing. Now in your young years, you've been through a lot.
Yeah.
And you've overcome a lot. If you were to maybe just offer some kind of actionable little nugget of wisdom, through the experience you've been through that just might even give people some hope, what would you like to share with people?
I feel like, finding that like 1 or 2 people who can just be there for you is really, really helpful. Being able to, realize that, it's kind of cliche, but like things are temporary. If you take it 1 step at a time, if you appreciate what you can appreciate at the time, which is really hard, honestly. Like for my friend, saying, be more positive is like the most cringiest thing you could possibly tell me.
Yeah.
But like being able to enjoy those moments, being able to realize that, your life isn't only going to be pain. Your life isn't only going to be the suffering. That you can still have something other than that suffering. Yeah, I think is really valuable.
It's like the practice of gratitude where we're just teaching our brain to look for positive things, and one last question then, I guess, in your darkest moments, what did you find to be grateful for?
I was really grateful for the people around me. And I know I've said it a few times, but like, I'm just really grateful that I had people to vent to have sitting there with me. Mm-hmm. And I was really grateful to my dad that he was able to put so much effort into, going out and finding these treatments for us, for learning so much, and for like helping me with this business, because he set this up basically so that I could work while still being largely sick. And so that's been a really amazing thing.
Yeah, kudos to your dad. We haven't even named him, but anyways, we'll just be like, kudos to your dad. That guy there that does that thing in the clinic. You can put in a good word, and I'll try and convince him through his busy schedule to come on and chat more about what he does as well, because I think it'd actually be really cool to tell the other side of the story. So now we've heard your story, to hear the story from another perspective. would be really incredible. So you're gonna have to twist his arm. You have a more direct line than I do to him. So twist his arm and tell him this was the most amazing experience. You just had like the most enlightening, incredible conversation of your life, and your life will be forever different because of it. And see if that convinces him to come on the podcast.
Let's see what I can do.
Yeah. Well, Olivia, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.